Hello and welcome to this bonus episode for the Tuts Plus series Tumblr Theming 101. In this episode, we're going to have a look at how we can add a very basic version of our Twitter timeline to our theme. Now, a quick recap. Previously, with the old Twitter API, version 1.0, we didn't really have to do anything special to include a Twitter feed on our theme. We could use any third-party plugin, like a jQuery plugin, include a Twitter handle, and then we could include their timeline. However, Twitter made some changes to its API and it bumped it up to version 1.1. They then required some sort of authentication to include a timeline. So this made things difficult because usually the authentication or the authentication that Twitter requires needs a server or a server-based language to make that request. As we're using Tumblr, we don't have a server, so we don't have any option to make this authentication currently. However, Tumblr itself allows you to post your content directly to your Twitter timeline. And the good folks at Tumblr have made it possible for us to get that authentication and display our Twitter feed on our Twitter feed on our theme. Now, to do this, we need to do two things. The first is we need to tell Tumblr or authorize Twitter to use our Tumblr account. So there's a conversation, there's a connection between the two. And then secondly, we need to update our themes markup. Now, for this episode, I'm basically just going to include our timeline with a text string for each tweet, and then that will link to the actual tweet. I'm not going to do anything like parsing the data that is returned from the Twitter API and filtering out hashtags or mentions or anchors or anything like that, as I'm not using a library and I want to keep this quite short. This is mainly just to show you how to enable the authentication and to very quickly use the Tumblr documentation to include your Twitter timeline. So the first thing you need to do is you'll need to go to your Tumblr homepage, click on the settings icon, then click on the name of the blog that you want to add a Twitter feed to. Next thing is you'll need to scroll down and you have these two social options, one for Facebook, one for Twitter. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have to sign in with Twitter. So if we click that, if you're not signed in, log in or sign into Twitter, you will then be presented with this page. Basically what we're doing here is we're authorizing Tumblr to read tweets from your timeline, update your profile, and post tweets for you. So this is what we want to do. We want to read tweets from our timeline. So let's authorize the app. Once that authentication is done, you'll see your Twitter handle in this area below where the button was. You can enable or disable this, and this doesn't make any difference because this is the authentication. So if you want to share your posts, when you create a new post on Tumblr directly onto your Twitter feed, enable this. If you don't, disable it. Once you're done, click Save. So that's the first part taken care of. Now the next part is I want to do some quick changes to the JavaScript. Now if we just quickly go to the documentation, as you can see here, there's a whole section on using Twitter and the API, and we get some JSON data back, which we aren't going to parse, we're just going to display. First thing I want to do is I just want to have this be a paragraph. So for each tweet, I want a paragraph, and inside that, I would like an anchor with the string of the tweet and then a link to that actual tweet. So I'm going to do that like so. Like so. The second thing I want to do is I want to make sure this opens up in a new window. So I'm going to just do target blank. So what we've got is we've got a paragraph, and then we have this anchor, and inside this anchor we'll have our tweet, and that will link to the actual tweet itself. So that's the JavaScript taken care of. The next thing I want to do is I just want to rename the default if blocks or the default Boolean appearance options. At the moment it's enable Twitter feed. However, I want it to match the pattern we've been using so far. So we're just going to drop the word enable. So let's take that out, like so. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to add in another block, and the block I want to add in is block Twitter. And I'm going to put it just inside. Now, there's a reason for doing this. This block itself checks to see if there is a Twitter account linked to your Tumblr account. Say you want to post your Tumblr content directly to your Twitter feed. You've linked up your Twitter account and Tumblr account. This would then be true and this would get printed. However, you may not want to display your Twitter feed on your actual Tumblr blog. So we want the option to actually still be able to do the authentication, but actually turn the feed off. So that's why I'm doing these two blocks. So that's that one taken care of. We need to rename the meta for the Boolean of enable Twitter feed. So let's just rename that to Twitter feed. And then finally, we need two elements. We need this element with the ID of Twitter, and then we need this element with the ID of tweets. So this element with the ID of Twitter is going to be like a container that is displayed once your tweets are added. And then this element with the ID of tweets is where the actual data is going to be placed. So let's go to the markup, look for the aside element. So right underneath our has pages, let's do block if Twitter feed. Let's do again block Twitter. So again, what we're doing is we've seen if the user has selected the option to show the Twitter feed, and then we're also seeing if the authentication or the Twitter account is linked to the Tumblr account, like so. Finally, we need the div with the ID of Twitter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to include a H5 in here to follow the pattern we've been using up here. Now, unfortunately, there isn't a language for Twitter, so there isn't a language variable for Twitter, so we're just going to put latest from Twitter, like so. And then, as I said, we need this nested div, or this nested element with the ID of tweets, like so. So let's take that, put that into the built-in HTML editor. Click Save. And then what we'll need to do is, because we've actually set the content on this meta tag for the Boolean Twitter feed to 0, we'll actually need to enable the Twitter feed. So this is just enabling the display of the Twitter feed. Then click Save. And then if we refresh our page, hopefully we should get our Twitter feed. Yep, so everything's right there. Save that. Let's have a look at what goes on. Just double check that we've wrote the blocks correctly. So the thing is, sometimes it's a panic whether or not I've wrote the code correctly or whether or not it's actually between waiting for the server to update. Okay, so that block's working correctly, but we have no tweets. So let's have a look what's going on. Okay, so there's no element with the ID of tweets, so we may have spelled the ID wrong. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, so we spelled that wrong, so let's just take that. Again, we just need to wait for the Tumblr server to update. Make sure we save that. And as you can see now, there are our tweets. And as I said, if you click on one, it'll take you to the actual Twitter website with that tweet. So what I want to do here is I actually just want to add a little bit of styling just to make these a little bit nicer. So let's go to our CSS and let's go to the aside section of our CSS. Now the first thing I want to do is aside ID Twitter. I want to do margin 23 pixels 0, 0, 0, like so. And then the next thing I want to do is I just want to reduce the margin bottom on the paragraphs. 0, 0. I'm going to reduce it to 15, like so. So let's just take all of that, put that in. Click save. And then we have it. There's our Twitter feed on our Tumblr theme. Now, there are a couple of ways you can make this a little bit nicer. What this will do is this will actually just go through and dump your entire Twitter feed on the page. So at the moment, actually, on this Twitter account that I've created just for this purpose, I only have 2 tweets. So you can actually limit this. And the way you would do this is to go about and just go and create a variable. I'm just going to call it tweets to display. And then I'm just going to go text Twitter feed length, like so. Now, again, we'll have to put this into some sort of quotes. And then what you need to do here is rather than doing this I up until data length, which will be, I think it's 20 is the maximum, just replace this here with that, like so. And then finally, we need to add the meta for this text appearance option. So let's just quickly go up here. I'm going to do meta name equals text Twitter feed length, and I'm going to set the default to 2, like so. Now, in hindsight, we probably don't want that string in brackets because we want it to be a number. So let's leave it like that. And let's put that in and see if that works. Okay, so everything seems okay. Now let's see if we can reduce that number to 1 and save it. So ideally we should just get the 1 tweet here. As before, this goes back to combining these options. Okay, so let's have a look with Firebug and just see if that's going through or not. So what we're expecting to see is we're expecting to see this variable we just created in the JavaScript for Twitter. Again, try not to worry too much about this injection. So as you can see here now, tweets display equals 2, so it's just being cached, I think. Yep, so that's now been reduced to 1. So that's a nice way of limiting how many tweets are being displayed. And I'm just going to leave it at 1 for the example. And again, ideally what we should be doing is we should be compensating for this somewhere. However, just for the sake of easiness, I'm going to actually just hide this. Oh, sorry, I'm not going to hide it. Sorry, I'm just going to center align it so it follows underneath. So let's add in a new rule to the first media query. Do aside Twitter, and then do text align center like so. And then we'll just copy this border here that we've already got going on, like so. And then what we'll need to do here is reset that. So aside, and we can probably just actually add it on to this UL rule here. So aside Twitter, like so. Okay, let's have a look where that spacing's coming from. Okay, so we just got to reduce that value down. So in the first media query, we're going to actually move that margin to here. So 15 pixels 0, 0, 0, like so. And then in the second one, just do a side Twitter margin 23 pixels 0, 0, 0, like so. And then finally just remove the margin that you set in the aside section, which is here. And that should be it for the Twitter feed and for this episode. So let's just see this refresh. Okay, so that's now your tweet. And if we resize, as you can see, there are your tweets there. So that is a basic overview of how you can go about adding your Twitter feed to this theme or any other theme using the Tumblr stroke Twitter authentication. I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next bonus video, we're going to look at how we can store assets using the Tumblr static file uploader and the Tumblr content delivery. And then the video after that, I'm just going to quickly show you my list file and how I use that to make adding color appearance options to the theme easier. So thanks for joining me, and I do hope you get to watch them too.